Micron has done very well over the past 12 months. The stock is up almost 130% over a 1 year's time frame. We can also see that the current price at around $150 represents the all-time high. So I don't believe it's ever been this high previously. Micron is active in the memory manufacturing industry, and this is let's say a part of the semiconductor industry which is quite volatile, and it's dominated mainly by three companies. Micron, as we talk about today, although they are not the biggest one. You could argue that they are the smallest player among the top three. Then you've got obviously Samsung and SK Hynix. Now, these three players combined are the three biggest manufacturing companies in terms of memory. Now, there's different type of memory, and the ones that, the ones that really everyone talks about now, and the one that essentially give the reason for the stock to go up over the past year, that's the HBM, so high bandwidth memory. So it's a bit more different kind of memory. To be honest, this is not my area of expertise, especially compared to, let's say, the general semiconductor logic that I'm kind of studied a bit more. But yeah, so in this area, the HBM, I think HBM is offers a bit more, let's say, power efficiency compared to the general DRAM. And that's where, the SK Hynix right now, you could say, has been the leader in. Samsung and Micron are trying to play catch up. And you can see that due to the, the importance of memory in the semiconductor space, obviously all these stocks has benefited over the last, let's say, 12 months with the AI expenditure, especially of NVIDIA's chips, but also AMD. But yeah, due to that and the importance of memory, and the fact that, Samsung is in Korea as well as SK Hynix. So the only American manufacturer is Micron that is left, and at least of a substantial size. So the American government in the, the broader CHIPS Act, which they granted, I think, $8 billion to Intel. I think that's the largest segment, at least the largest single recipient. But Micron is huge because they got almost $6.1 billion for the memory part. And this money is obviously spread around over, let's say, a couple of years, maybe 5-10 years. And then it's also very important to know that in addition to the 6.1 billion in support from the government, they'll also get some taxing relief in the future, up to 25%, and especially in some parts of the USA. I think if they decide to do some kind of, let's say, memory fabs in Idaho or New York, that's gonna give them additional tax grants. We can also see that Micron is completely sold out for their HBM capacity for this year, and essentially the entire next year almost already. That's a really, really bullish sign. And then we can also see that they're aiming, as I mentioned before, Micron right now has, I would say, like, according to Anantic, this article is a bit old, but they say that, in 2023, they should have around 4 to 5% of the market share, which I think is fairly okay, fairly realistic, because SK Hynix and Samsung are the two big players there. But Micron aims to have, 25% of the HBM market by already 2025. And they do say that their HBM 3E version should be more efficient compared to the competition. But that's, let's wait and see, because they are, to this date, they are not as good as SK Hynix right now. But we can say that they also recently won a contract with NVIDIA, although not for the lion's share of the NVIDIA GPUs, because that contract is to SK Hynix. But yeah, that's a good sign, at least, that NVIDIA validated their, their HBM memory. So that's a bit of background on the company and, how well the stock has been doing. But let's have a look, a bit more in the, let's say, details. So you can see that on the last earnings report, the CEO, Sanjay Mehrotra, is saying that, the AI server demand is driving rapid growth in the HBM and DDR5 data center SSDs and essentially everything. Because once you have your computing power with your AI GPUs, you obviously need a lot of memory and a lot of storage for that data, because you're generating a lot of models and output from these different large language models, and that's going to be stored somewhere. And Micron luckily also kind of sells NAND and storage solutions. So in a sense, when this company is like quite dependent on their memory side, but once the memory side goes up, you should expect at least some upstick in the other, the other segments. Right now, I think Micron's sales is divided by 70, so usually it's 70% in the memory and 30% in storage, or 27 or 28, somewhere thereabouts. So it's the two main big, let's say, separations that you can make from their products. Now we are gonna look at, let's say the March earning report that they had. You can see that they separated in 4 different segments of computer networking, mobile, embedded, and storage. And just look at these numbers, 2 billion, 1.5 billion, 1 billion, and just under 1 billion. So if you go back now to a year previous to that, the same exact quarter, Q1 of last year. And now we can see again here that, roughly 1.4 billion, whereas this year we had 2.2, so it's a big increase. Not a surprise, because there's a huge demand for their memory systems. The mobile was at 1.6 this year, and last year it was just below 1. So it's a bit fluctuating a bit, but then again you look at this now, you go back to already 2 years ago, so 2022. Now everything looks much more, 3.5 billion on the compute, almost 2 billion on the mobile, around the same on storage, I believe, because that's 1.2 billion, and this year it was, so the embedded, it's the same, but the storage is 900 this year, whereas in 2022 it was almost 1.3 billion. So what I'm showing with this is just, this company is very cyclical, and it's always been that in the memory space. Now some people argue that that's gonna change, at least so long as the bull market in the AI GPU kind of survives, because the amount of memory that you need is like humongous. For example, NVIDIA's H100 uses 8 gigabytes of HBM memory, and NVIDIA's next generation Blackwell increases that well above 140 gigabytes. And AMD is gonna have a product on the market, they have a product on the market right now with almost 200 gigabytes of HBM, and they're gonna have a product late this year with almost 300. So there's a lot of demand out there, and not only that, every single chip will need more HBM memory per single chip, more gigabytes, but also the number of chips out there are gonna increase quite a bit. You can see that if you follow Dan on X or Twitter, you can see that TSMC's CoWoS capacity is gonna increase. So they say that the CoWoS capacity is gonna leap up to 33 wafers per month by Q3 this year, which is almost a doubling from Q2. And I think this number 17,000 is already much higher than it was in, let's say, Q4 2023. I think that number was around 10 to 15,000 wafers per month. And CoWoS, what is CoWoS? So this is chip on wafer on silicon, I think, and it's essentially one packaging step when you add the chips like AMD Semi 300 or NVIDIA's Hopper H100, H200, or Blackwell B100, B200. So this manufacturing technology, the packaging side of things from TSMC enables those big chips, and that's very important. So one way to kind of estimate the number of NVIDIA and AMD chips that they're gonna be selling is to actually do a reverse napkin math on the allocated number of wafers per month on the CoWoS side from TSMC to NVIDIA respective, and also AMD. That way, knowing how many chips that AMD and NVIDIA can manufacture with a single wafer, then you can take their allocation. Let's say that NVIDIA has half of this allocation. Some people argue it's just above half. Let's say 15,000-16,000 of this CoWoS capacity by Q3 is going to NVIDIA. And if you now have the number of allocated CoWoS capacity, and then it's just a matter of figuring out how many chips can they manufacture with one single wafer. And I think that's in our rough napkin math is anywhere around 25 to 45 chips. But so knowing that the TSMC is increasing this obviously gives a signal that NVIDIA, AMD, and even Intel will need even more HBM manufacturer capacity, and hence the reason that that Micron is telling that they are sold out for 2024 and essentially already in 2025. So looks like their revenue will continue to be stable over the coming, at least this year and next year. Now, if we look at, the estimated earnings per share forecast from analysts, you can see that this year the estimation is around 0.3 cents, but next year it's going to explode to almost $7. And if they manage to beat that by, let's say, 10%, 15%, it's going to be $8 per share. And the stock price right now is at 150 roughly US dollars. So if you take, let's assume that Micron is going to beat their consensus, which I believe will be increased at least by when we get closer to Q4 this year. Now, let's say if we go with the number 8, and if you take 153, so a second please, 153 divided by 8 US dollar per share, that's a PE ratio of 19. So it's not a whole lot for a company that right now grows fast. Now, the issue that I say, when I emphasize that they currently are growing fast, it's because, Micron is historically a cyclical business. So they have like high growth phase and a very contraction phase, because that's how the memory business has been working over the past, decades. But again, if we assume that the same trend continues, because at some point the AI demand is going to taper off, and you can already see that Nvidia's quarter-to-quarter earnings growth revenue-wise is kind of slowing down already compared to, let's say, late last year and early this year. So yeah, I don't think like the infinite growth obviously is going to be out there. But yeah, 19 times earnings by, the end of this year at the current share price, assuming that they're going to beat and have $8 US next year. So forward PE ratio of 19, thereabouts. That's not a whole lot for if they especially increase their, sales next the year after that in 2026. That's possible, if TSMC is increasing their CoWoS capacity, as we saw here, by quite a bit already this year, and there's very strong rumors that in 2025 and 2026 they will increase that again by quite a bit. So yeah, it's all coming down to how much AI hardware is gonna be needed, and I think that's the main stopper here, because historically the PE ratio, you would say, once it goes up to kind of 19, you can see that the stock is been at quite elevated level. You can see this peak. This is the PE ratio from Q4 of 2019 and to Q2 of 2021. So look at the price there, roughly by 2019 there, and then it's kind of got elevated, and then it had the contraction phase that we speak about, and also the contraction phase before this elevation here. So yeah, it's it's very difficult. Now the PE kind of is soaring, and the stock price is obviously going up quite a bit. Could this be just below the peak, and then we have another 3 to 4 years of sideways, essentially the stock not gaining anything and maybe losing something? I don't know, to be honest. This is my first coverage on Micron. I'll definitely continue to cover this company. I think you should be cautious. My suspicion is that right now on the fundamentals it's not completely overvalued at all, but again, I do believe, I'm a bit more suspicious on the AI demand. I think a lot of the companies like Nvidia, AMD, and also HBM manufacturers like Micron and SK Hynix are earning a lot of money. Those who are actually manufacturing these kind of components, like Broadcom as well. But it looks like as of right now, there's not a whole lot of substantially real solutions that gonna be offered to the consumer. So if you're the company let's say Google or Microsoft, I would like to see them start to make some money on these huge investments that they are making in AI. If they do that, then maybe this trend can continue for at least 2-3 years. But if there's no real applications out there that the consumer gonna use more than a couple of times, for example, a lot of people use ChatGPT, let's say a few times, and then they stop using it because it's not that great right now that you can continue use it all the time and earn money or do something useful with it. So I think you should be cautious, follow the market. I'll make sure that I follow this up, but this is not my long-term understanding of this, but I think for the moment, I think it's not super overvalued in my opinion, but you really have to be cautious with these kind of AI stocks right now. No one knows when the bubble is kind of bursting. So yeah, this is not investment advice, but thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, engage in a discussion in the comment section, and let me know your ideas, what do you think about Micron. And yeah, so see you in the next one.